Hello and welcome to the Careers Beyond Teaching podcast, the show where we aim to showcase where a career in teaching can take you. I'm sat here with Ziggy Moore, the founder and owner of Moore Education.
Yes, thank you very much, Rob. Thank you for having me down and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I've been really excited. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm going to start right at the beginning and ask you, what made you get into teaching in the first place?
My teaching journey, or my educational journey, kind of was maybe slightly different. So in primary school, I was I wasn't permanently excluded. The best way to describe it is one day after numerous incidents and spending extended time outside the headmaster's room, I was told by my mum was told the best thing is that you might need to find another school for young Ziggy, because it just really wasn't working out. I spent more time outside of the classroom looking in than I did inside of the classroom. It was quite evident that the facilities weren't there to educate me or to cope with me. I don't think there was any understanding of kind of, I don't know, behavior management or any of those kind of concepts. That would have been like the mid to late 80s. So late 80s, early 90s. So the idea was one of two things. It was either to send me home, send me to Jamaica, to a boarding school. That's where most of my cousins went to, independent or private schools in Jamaica. Or it was to kind of stay here now in the early 90s. Outcomes for black boys from the inner city were terrible. The educational outcomes were terrible, so we had to look for alternatives, because we knew what would happen if I stayed in the education system going into secondary school. So my mum found a predominantly black independent school in North London. It was church run, and that's where I spent the last few years of primary school into secondary school. So when you say going into teaching, what happens is I'm very aware of what the outcomes are for children from specific backgrounds, boys from specific backgrounds, and my mission in life is to change that as best as we can in the circumstances in which we are. So based on, if you just kind of look at the statistics, so you look at my background, where I came from, the likelihood is I wasn't going to end up being a teacher. Most of my peers who I grew up with didn't or weren't fortunate enough to go into professional careers, because that isn't the kind of trajectory of many of the young men and women, but particularly young men from my background, where I'm from. So the mission is to make an impact and change that, and we know education, it can sound cliched, but education is often the key. And to have somebody in the system who not only can relate to you, who understands you, who may have been through what you've been through, not saying that is only from that perspective that children can be taught, but it does often help. It does make a difference. Knowing where I've come from and what my life chances are, it's about changing the life chances of others.
So would you say that school failed you?
I wouldn't say school failed me. I think I always explain it in this way. My grandparents would have come here in like the mid 50s. My dad would have come here like early 60s. The plan was never to stay. The plan, most Caribbean immigrants' plan was to come here. Most immigrants to come here, earn some money and go back home. And in essence, that's what they were sold. So 30, 40 years later, the education system, 50 years later, never anticipated having children who looked like me that they had to cater for. So the system was never set up or designed to have to cater for children like me. We know the education system was set up so Your top 5% who go to grammar schools, they go on and do a certain type of job. Then you had your secondary modern, they go on to do a certain type of job. And then you've maybe got the low 10% who are generationally unemployed. I'm not somebody who's going to sit here and say, oh, the system, blah, blah, blah. I've read a bit, I've studied it. The system was never designed to cater for how we see society. We're kind of playing catch up is the best way.
And there's a legacy issue 100%. And I feel like you're talking about 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. What's the story now, would you say, in terms of exclusion and
Well, to make it clear, as I said, I was talking about my journey. My dad's journey was similar when he came here. When he came here in '63, my dad, my uncles, my aunts, many of them, so my dad was permanently excluded from school. By the age of 12, he went to an approved school. From an approved school, he went, his life was pretty much mapped out for him. Once he went to an approved school, same as myself, I wasn't permanently excluded, but it was very different then because it used to be called expelled. So that's when, but I was fixed term excluded many times as a child. And in essence, it's only because my mum had a very good relationship with the school while they were able to say, listen, this is not working, we don't want to put it on his record, but after the summer, he can't come back.
Politely asking.
Yeah, he can't come back. My son, I remember, I think around year 2, year 3, became very unhappy at school, started to get notes and so on, but luckily I've seen the pattern, so I kind of knew where this was going. Emotionally, he was struggling to articulate himself and why he was sad and what it was, but I knew exactly what it was. So when we look at exclusions, as we know, if you are what's the statistic? Black boys in certain parts of the country are 5 times more likely to be excluded than anybody else. If you're a black boy on free school meals, it's a black boy, free school meals with a special educational need, you're 168 times more likely to be expelled than a white girl without any of those needs in the same school. You can see the statistics for yourself. Fixed term exclusions are disproportionate. I think I interrupted a lesson recently about when we look at the what we call the school to prison pipeline. So a lot of these things are established in the schools, these ideas of exclusion, and we use exclusion as in being excluded from school, but the social exclusion as in they were looking at, I was entering a class and they were looking at prison reform in the United States and about how the United States is such a terrible place and how they disproportionately imprison men of colour. And I said, well, actually England has a higher, proportionally in regards to the population, higher incarceration rate of men of colour. So whereas we are 3% of the population roughly in this country, but make up 14% of the population in prisons, whereas in the United States, as a proportion of black people make up about 13% of the population, but make up, it's just under 45, so between 40 and 45%. So proportionally, you have greater rates of discrimination in the prison system here than you do in the United States. And we can trace it all the way back to the school system, where your first encounter, where you are clearly made to feel excluded and separated. And that's kind of maybe leading on to later questions, why I do what I do now.
Well, this is what I was going to say, is so that is this kind of all your buy-in? Were you there thinking, I'm going to go into teaching to make a difference? What was it?
Yeah, the hope was to be able to go in and make a difference and impact lives, which I know I have. I still see children who I taught years and years ago. Interesting enough, the other day, end of term,
Yeah, I was struggling to get you for a 2-minute.
There were children. I'll be honest, I don't remember half. I can remember some, but I remember I taught them years ago, and they can still tell me stories about the impact of what it was to have me as a teacher. I've taught all over London, so I can be in different places and people come up to me, and I started quite young as well. I was in the classroom at I think I was a TA 23, 24, teacher training 24, 25, in a classroom at 25. So yeah. There's year 11s who I might have covered your lesson or taught or a team taught, and they're pushing 30 now. So
and you taught for 10 years as well, right? I think I saw that on your website.
Yeah. I still do teach from 23 to what am I now? So over nearly 15 years, 37, 38. I can't, sometimes I forget how old I am. So yeah.
So you've seen a lot of kids, right?
Yes,
You've been there. So you were in a mainstream, because I say teaching, obviously you're still teaching, but you were in the mainstream classroom, I'll refer to it as.
Yeah, it was mainstream for a solid 10 years. Yeah.
And how was it? How did you find it?
In the classroom, I loved being in the classroom. I enjoyed teaching. I enjoyed changing lives. I sometimes take for granted how much, I think, as when you're in the classroom, you don't know how much impact you make. It's only like now, years later, I'll have students on Instagram, Mr. Moore, I'm at university, and do you remember the time we did this, and you made me do this, and now I'm at uni and I've got to do this, and you made me think in this way, and I'm like, no. I can't
That's
remember.
Nice though. That's like...
You can look back and think, wow, you really, really made an impact. However, my struggle was more so outside of the classroom, the kind of whole school setup. I wasn't brilliantly prepared for that kind of hierarchical structure of kind of how it works.
With colleagues?
Yeah, with colleagues, just with the whole kind of setup. Yeah, I wasn't brilliantly prepared for it. I don't think I was cut out for it. It just didn't work. So yeah, that was one of the main reasons why I kind of removed myself from the setting. Most teachers, this isn't a criticism of anybody. Most teachers, human beings tend to gravitate to people who are similar to themselves. It's quite natural for humans to do so. You want to relate to, you feel comfortable. Very few teachers come from my background that I can relate to, especially those kind of within power. It's not natural for human beings to do this, and this is something it's not natural. So if most teachers, especially English teachers, are probably white women who are who are middle class and have come from a middle class background, you're not really going to kind of fit into your department. Then if you look at the majority of teachers within education and their background, maybe their political understanding and so on and so forth, they're not really going to be able to relate, which is why here, one of the schools I worked at was probably the anomaly there, which is why I still have a very close association with the school. But yeah, I just realized, okay, all right, this isn't going to be the setting for me. This isn't going to be where I'm going to be able to make an impact. So there are other ways rather than me. There are some people who are more than willing to fight, but I'm a little bit more strategic.
Okay, interesting. And do you think that was a personal thing, or do you think that's like a wider issue?
No, I never. There are some people who might take it personally and look at it as systemic and things like that. I never took it personally. I fully understood how it was set. How I always look at it is, I'm Jamaican. If I was to go into a staff room in Jamaica, the majority of the makeup of the teachers there would be very different because of the country that you're in, the place that you're in. If you go to a staff room in, let's say, a Lambeth school or a Lewisham school, the makeup is going to be very, very different than to a school on the fringe, a Surrey school. Yeah, it's not. I don't feel it's my place to go into an institution and force change because it's not fair. That's not my perspective. I don't think that's fair. Personally. I just saw how it was. I said, okay, all right, well, maybe this isn't a place for me. I'm strong enough and smart enough to maybe form something where I'm able to exact my goals and what I want and still have the same impact. But it's just not going to happen in a school setting. That's not going to happen.
And where you say your goals, did you like sit down and think, this is what I want to do? Like, what came next?
Usually it never, life never happens like that. You're usually forced into circumstances where you're forced to make certain decisions. I was forced to make certain decisions. One of the schools, I'll be quite open. One of the schools, there are accusations made against me. It was clear I didn't fit into the school. The school, on one hand, they wanted to keep me because they saw how popular I was with the students. On the other hand, I just didn't fit into that school. So when the opportunity arose to be able to help me exit the door, it was taken, although none of those accusations were upheld, and the actual parents, it was the parents of the child who came to my aid, because the child, I wouldn't say under duress, but made a statement, was asked to make a statement by senior management, and when the parents found out, because I taught him and I taught the older brother, actually tutored the older brother, and when the parents found out what happened, and then they spoke to the child, they withdrew the statement and wrote a statement in my defense. But by then, it was all too late. It didn't mean anything, and would I have wanted to go back into those circumstances anyway? So
that sounds stressful.
Very, very so. But
looking back,
brilliant, fantastic.
Silver linings kind of thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's as they say. Diamonds are formed under pressure. I wouldn't say I'm a diamond, but the situation that hopefully I'm building will be precious to a lot of children and impactful.
And it's so you are a mentor, a teacher, a tutor, and essentially a business owner?
I don't even know what I am. I'm going to take that list down. I'm going to take that list down. I do a lot of work, mentor not only to students but to teachers as well.
Okay.
So a lot of teachers do a little bit of consulting to some educational institutions. What else? Mentoring to children as well.
Did you say you have a homeschool network?
Yeah, we operate a homeschool network at Key Stage 3. So that came out of the tuition. That came out of the tutoring. So how the tutoring started is I went into interesting enough, a school, the same school that the last school I went into, and I was teaching, and a lot of the children said they never had a teacher like me. Do I tutor? Because the type of school it was, that was quite standard to get tuition. I was like, no, I've never tutored that. I'm alright, I'll have my weekends to myself. I had children pressuring me, parents pressuring me, went into it, started it. And then it just kind of blossomed. It kind of blossomed from there.
It's kind of nice because it's like I don't know if you believe that everything happens for a reason. It's like that there was demand and people were asking you to do that. It's not like you were there thinking, what am I going to do? The answer was probably there in a way.
Yeah. I had no intention of going into it, none whatsoever. It was the students who I'd gone into a top set class, and within 2 or 3 weeks they were saying, we've never been taught like this. This is crazy. And parents were like, who's this teacher who's getting my child to read? Okay, so you have to be the tutor. I'm like, I'm not tutor.
And with more education and your teaching and your networks, when you think about what am I going to teach your kids, where are you coming from? Are you coming from what the exam board's saying? Are you just going to teach from a scheme of work that a school would do? Like, are you going to have these more open conversations?
No, well, it's a bit of both actually. Interesting in the homeschool. It's because it's key stage 3, and that's why we've kind of kept it to the key stage 3. It's a lot more critical thinking, a lot more discussion, public speaking, formulating ideas, challenging. They love all of that. That's all it is, and it's about exposing them an entrance using something they enjoy, but then being able to expose them and challenge really, and that's what children love. They love being in the classroom, they love being challenged, they love their thoughts being challenged, but they've got to be comfortable enough to where they're able to express their thoughts, their feelings, their ideas in a way that's comfortable. And even if it's discussing what they're interested in, and then building that foundation, saying, okay, we can't do that all day. Nobody does that all day. We're gonna now develop. We're now gonna move.
So, do you have any advice for teachers? Oh, actually, do you have any advice for someone who would consider being a teacher? Would you recommend it to someone who doesn't know what they want to do? Maybe someone who's like working out what they want to do with their life?
No, I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who's working out who wants to do with their life. If I'm going to be honest with you, it's not the type of career that you would go into kind of, for want of a better phrase, willy-nilly, because you're going to really impact lives. I'm very much against it. Take your time and figure out what it is that you want to do. Don't do that on or at the expense of hundreds, possibly thousands of young people's lives where you're kind of finding yourself. Go on an expedition to Southeast Asia or South America and I don't know, indulge in some hallucinogenic whatever it is, and looking deep into your soul and find yourself. But don't do it in a city or any school impacting young people. I wouldn't recommend it. If you genuinely have a passion to change lives, and you understand that that's what you will be doing, for good or for bad, you remember those, I don't know if you meet people who you went to school with, or you see those kind of discussions. Do you remember this teacher? Someone said, do you remember your favorite teacher, or do you remember your work? You vividly remember those teachers. You can remember the teachers who didn't put in any effort. You remember the teachers who don't care. Be it 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. My dad spoke to me about a teacher who, when he first came into this country, helped him with his literacy, and that was 1963. So what's that, 50 years ago? He vividly remembers this, and he remembers getting a certificate for making, he was like 8 or 9, for making this progress because she'd stayed with him, and then she charted his progress to secondary school, and she took him aside and said, make sure you keep... He remembers that because it was a teacher who embraced him and kind of loved him and gave him that. Didn't get to secondary school, but that teacher, that one teacher can make or break you. You can be having an off day and say something off the cuff to a child, and it will destroy them. I wouldn't advise anybody who's not sure what to do. Those who are in teaching, and maybe considering, because we have a very high turnover rate of teachers, extremely high.
Well, why do you think that is?
It's because most of it now isn't about teaching. It's not about being in the classroom. It's not about what's that film called with Robin Williams?
Oh, Dead Poet.
Yeah, Dead Poet. You don't get that Dead Poet Society kind of You with me? I'm sure I read somewhere.
Health and safety, you can't stand on the desks.
Yeah, every time they play that film, like there's a surge in teacher applications.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm sure. Don't quote me, but I'm almost sure I read that somewhere. Like every time they play it on terrestrial TV, there's a huge surge in teacher applications. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. It's assessments, it's emails, it's marking, it's compliance. But that doesn't mean that you're not making an impact on the lives of young people, and it's important. And sometimes you need to take a step back. Just kind of take a step back, because you can get caught up in the process, and you need to take a step back sometimes and realize that's actually, you've got all the emails and the job, and you're applying to move into different areas of the school, senior management, head of department, blah blah blah. But actually, that's what is the most important thing. And sometimes I know people can, that can disappear quite easily.
It can get lost, can't it?
Yeah,
for some people.
Yeah, for some people.
What do you see a rise in homeschool networks, or what's the future in your sphere? What's the future?
In my sphere, mainly in the tuition, in the online space, online education is booming. So we transitioned where we used to kind of operate in a community centre, but we're now online. So that's booming. We've really got to kind of utilise and capitalise on that space. And what I mean by that is more so kind of creating courses, creating content for young people to be able to engage with, and for parents to be able to use. And my personal opinion is that the idea of school, as in 1,000 children coming every day to a physical building, that model, well, we know that model doesn't work for at least 20% of the population. It just doesn't work. But I think it's slowly changing. I think we've seen with this pandemic, we've seen attempts at online schooling and teaching hasn't been brilliantly successful, if we're going to be honest. But I know we've been fairly successful. We've been very successful, actually, because of how we've engaged with it. And I think you're going to see a change over the next 10 years. And there's going to be a lot more opportunities arise in education outside of this fixed building type model. Yeah, it's going to change.
The model's outdated then, and
the model is completely, it is outdated. As I said earlier on, we've not moved a million miles away from skimming off your 5% at the top, your grammar school lot, your secondary modern lot. I used this analogy the other day. I was explaining to a parent. I left school about 20 years ago, and when I left school, what they used to use as a threat, they said, "Oh yeah, you're gonna get a job in McDonald's. Go get a job in McDonald's." I'm like, all right, cool, because that was kind of the lowest point of entry. You could go and get a job in McDonald's. But the thing with McDonald's is McDonald's has always had an amazing training scheme. I can't remember. I remember reading it years ago, but like they were going to develop their training scheme into like a diploma, where you can work your way up. You can work in. I could have. Let's say I left school, and if I'd have worked for McDonald's for 20 years, I'd probably be now, I don't know, maybe some kind of regional type manager or something like that. I would have been hired as a store manager, regional manager, on 45 to 55k a year, maybe a business a company car and what have you. Right, that's decent, yeah. I went into McDonald's the other day, Wharf Road, and there were the majority of the people in there were delivery drivers.
Yeah.
Like these Deliveroo, Uber Eats, Just Eats, there's many others.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And then you don't go to the till to order, you press this thing, it's touch screen. You press touch screen, get your order, and then somebody calls you up. Now, when I was a kid, you had maybe about 5 or 6 counters, you had lots of people, and then you had even more people around the back. And when I looked at it, they've probably, to what I would have known, because I don't go in there regularly, maybe a third of the people that I would have known to have worked in 10, 15 years ago, working in now. So okay, so all of those entry level, but they're all gone. Then when I looked, okay, so it's the delivery drivers. Those delivery drivers were adults, and they were from a range. I heard Portuguese, I heard Polish, I heard lots of different languages. I was picking up, I was like, okay, you've got people from all over the world that are coming here. So you've got immigration, people are coming here who are doing those types of jobs, those entry level jobs. And those people are able to work longer hours because they have less commitments. They don't have to go to mum's house to go and check up and see if she's all right. They don't have to go to such and such's birthday because their families, they're just here to work. So I'm thinking, hold on. So that, a lot of the children we're dealing, what does their future look like? Where are they going to go? So you can't even say to somebody, if you don't get your GCSEs, you're going to work in McDonald's. No, there's going to be pretty much nowhere for you to work unless you are qualified to a certain level. Those jobs aren't going to exist anymore. You've heard the fall of the industrial north, like we heard that 30 years ago, and all those that's now coming down to the southeast, where the customer service, all of those jobs, it's all online. It's all online. It's all online. I've worked in an Amazon factory. I did some hours there a few Christmases ago. Let me see what this is about. I've worked in these warehouses. If that's what the future is for many of the kind of the dearth of secondary modern children, are we really preparing? Do they know what the future really holds?
Yeah. Do we?
Yeah. Do we know how critical it is? That's the message I'm getting through to a lot of parents. You know how critical it is that your child at GCSE gets a grade 6 and above. Like, it could be how are they going to eat? How? Especially if this is where they're going to be spending the rest of their lives. How? If you're from a certain background, you've got limited generational wealth, you've got limited access to certain opportunities.
Ziggy, when I'm in McDonald's, this is not what I'm thinking about.
No, because I hadn't been in for a while. I was like, oh.
I'm thinking 20 nuggets, 9.
That's how I think. That's how I think. I look around and I look at the children in my community from my background. Young, you got children from the black community. As I said, limited generational wealth, limited networking access. Job market's changing dramatically. Are you prepared for that new job market? No. No, they're not. So, how's it going to work? Yeah, how's it going to work? How's it going to work? And it's the insistence that making it clear to a lot of our parents, a lot of our children, that times are changing and we have to adapt. So that's really my mission at the moment. My mission is to let parents from our community know that how important and how vital it is that we push our children to get a base level of education, because in times to come, whereas before it maybe wasn't as important, you could kind of turn it around. You might mess around in late 20s. You could maybe used to have some things called access courses. You could jump on an access course, go to kind of uni, and you can see those doors slowly closing. That's what it was like. That's how a lot of people from my community would have accessed education. If they didn't do very well at secondary school, they might have been able to turn it around a little bit later. But the cost of education is so high. When I was at university, I think I was like last year before it went up to £3,000, and that was a massive thing. £3,000. Now that's $9,000. So yeah.
So is the answer to that alternative kind of models, alternative smaller kind of networks similar to yours, do you know, is that the answer?
I don't think there is one kind of blanket.
Answer.
Yeah, I don't think there's one blanket answer. I think we definitely need to be rethinking how education works. Definitely. I'm not sure if I am completely gonna be the answer for everybody. We're gonna explore it, and our outcomes are positive. Funny, I have to meet 3 former students now. Not now, about 11:30. Jump back on the tube. Just to kind of just discuss what were the outcomes. How did our service help you? How did it help you to understand the wider world? I definitely think that there is going to need to be a rethinking, especially as you said, on a kind of community-based level, and looking at the impacts. And that's all communities. As the world changes, we really, really need to look at, is this whole school 30 hours a week, is it really working, or do we need to, because I know at certain times I used to take children out at 14 and then you go on and do certain things, or is this general? In the same way it was kind of assessed in the 80s, bringing in GCSEs, moving away from the tiered system. I definitely think as the world changes, there needs to be a massive reevaluation of it now.
I could listen to you speak, I could have this conversation for another hour, honestly. But in the interest of time, if someone listening to this wants to find out more about you, or have a kind of, where can they find you?
You'll find out more about me, LinkedIn, Ziggy Moore. Find out more about my business, mooreeducation.co.uk. Instagram, mooreeducation01. Those are all the socials and the handle. I'm not big on Twitter. I had a conversation. Someone said I got to get onto Twitter, but
it's all consuming, I think.
So LinkedIn on a professional level, just message me. I'm always up for just pointing someone in the right direction or having conversations. Instagram, you can message me again. That's 2 O's, Moore, More Education 01.
And if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put this all.
Oh, we're going to be on YouTube. Oh, brilliant.
Maybe I'll ask you on it. But no, thank you.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's no problem. All right, man.
Cool. Thank you so much.
No problem.